What does it mean to rule an empire and your own mind? In the heart of ancient Rome, a man sat alone in his tent on the battlefield. By torchlight, he did not write about war or conquest, but about how to be calm in the face of rage, kind amid cruelty, and humble while wearing a crown. His name was Marcus Aurelius. History knows him as the last of the 5 good emperors, but philosophy remembers him as something greater, a Stoic, a thinker, and the author of Meditations, a book still read today, 2,000 years later. He ruled over one of the greatest empires in history, and yet he spent much of his life trying to understand how to live a good one. Before he was emperor, before he led armies and shaped the fate of Rome, Marcus Aurelius was simply a boy with a thoughtful mind and a quiet spirit. Born on April 26, 121 AD, in Rome, he came into the world with every advantage: noble blood, family wealth, and access to Rome's best education. But even from a young age, Marcus showed little interest in luxury. He preferred simplicity, wearing plain clothes, sleeping on the floor, and embracing discomfort not as punishment, but as training. His father died early, leaving Marcus to be raised by his mother, Domitia Lucilla. She was cultured, strong-willed, and intelligent. From her, he inherited not just discipline, but also a sense of moral clarity. His grandfather, too, played a role, instilling in him a sense of public service and duty to the Roman state. Marcus's seriousness and honesty caught the attention of Emperor Hadrian. The emperor saw promise in the boy and arranged for Marcus to be adopted into the imperial succession line. When Hadrian died, his successor, Antoninus Pius, adopted Marcus as his son and heir. At only 17 years old, Marcus was bound for the throne, not because he sought it, but because it was placed in his path. He accepted the role not with ambition, but with humility and a growing sense of responsibility. Education became the core of his early life. He was trained in rhetoric, law, poetry, and politics, but what most deeply moved him was philosophy. In particular, he became devoted to Stoicism, a school of thought that taught that virtue was the only true good, and that external things like wealth, fame, and even pain or death were ultimately indifferent. Stoicism promised not power but peace. It taught that human beings should live in harmony with reason and nature, and that what mattered most was not what happened to you, but how you responded. One of Marcus's most influential teachers was Junius Rusticus, a Stoic philosopher who introduced him to the works of Epictetus. Epictetus, once a slave, taught that freedom was not a matter of status, but of self-mastery. His teachings planted the seed of a lifelong discipline to govern one's mind, to act justly, and to live without complaint. Under Rusticus's guidance, Marcus learned how to examine himself daily, how to welcome hardship, and how to treat others with fairness no matter their rank or conduct. Rather than use his education to sharpen political skills alone, Marcus turned inward. He began writing what would become the private reflections known today as Meditations. They weren't essays or treatises, but short personal entries, reminders to himself to stay calm, to live simply, to be patient and forgiving, and to remain grounded amid fame and power. He wrote not to impress others, but to shape his own character. He reminded himself that anger is a weakness, that death is natural, and that each day is a chance to be better than the last. Throughout his 20s and 30s, Marcus studied law and governance under Antoninus Pius, who reigned as emperor with restraint and wisdom for 23 years. Marcus admired Antoninus deeply, especially for his steady mind and sense of duty. He studied him not just as a ruler, but as a role model in Stoic living. Antoninus rarely lost his temper, showed no greed, and kept to a simple life despite his immense power. Exactly the kind of leadership Marcus hoped to emulate. By the time Marcus turned 40, he was no longer the uncertain youth of his early studies. He had spent more than 2 decades preparing, not with fanfare or glory, but with focus. He had mastered Greek and Latin, law and military command, but more importantly, he had begun to master himself. He saw leadership not as a reward, but as a responsibility. He believed that philosophy was not meant to be talked about, but lived, a good man in his view, was measured not by words but by actions.